All right. Oh man, how you doing, bro? How's it
Hey,
going?
bro, what's going on?
We are going live. I just jumped off of Bob's show
Let's
and now
see.
I'm on here.
Why can't I hear you? Check, check, check.
Oh, can you hear
Can
me
you hear me?
now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. There you go.
Yep. Hey, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Were you waiting there long?
No, I actually just got here like 2 minutes ago. I just popped
Okay.
in. So,
Oh wow, perfect. Yeah. I just got off of Bob's show and then I'm like, oh man, 8:45. People have been waiting here for 15 minutes. I appreciate that. Thank you guys.
I just rolled in the door. I literally just rolled in the door. Today was Liberation Day. That's why I couldn't make it to Uptime tonight. Trump announced Liberation Day, a couple of weeks ago on April 2nd or whatever with his tariffs. But today was actually Liberation Day for my family because my daughter works for an accountant. And so, tax season is over today on the 15th. And,
Okay.
she's pretty much been chained to her desk for like, 3 months now, working 12-hour days to try to help get caught up on taxes. And so April 15th, we always try to this is like her freedom day. She's finally able to
Right.
go back to work in normal shifts, and so we went out and had dinner, got a movie, and had a nice time. So
Right. That's good. That's good.
yeah,
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, so we had a good time. We're talking about the rapture, of course, and the timing and Easter. And did you ever redo a video with a little voiceover action on it, or what
I
did you
did
think?
not get to do like we discussed. I didn't do a director's cut like we discussed, but I did
Yeah.
do. My son ran it through a couple different computer programs and sort of remastered the voice where it doesn't really sound like I'm in a tin can underwater. It just sounds like I'm in a tin can. So
Okay.
it's better.
Okay.
It's not perfect, but it's better. And
Right.
I had about 180 people view it and say that it was, better, that they were able, they couldn't watch the first one and this one was a little bit better. So
Okay.
I haven't had the
Good.
time to do anything other than that, though. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm
Good.
really, I tell you, I'm really excited for this weekend. I mean, I think it's got a lot of potential. I actually sent something over to Bob and to Greg because, like I said, I knew I wasn't going to be on Uptime, but I came across something where somebody, was doing a study on um, basically like what we were talking about, what we've been talking about, 2025, 2032 being that 7-year time frame.
Yep.
And this guy did an awesome study on how, 2025 to 2032 is a very unique, like, as far as Jewish dates and things like that. It's a very unique, like it only happens once every whatever, however many hundreds of years. And so it shows a lot of potential. I mean, it's hard to describe because it's a long. I've got it on my phone. It's a really long. He gives a very, very detailed description, but I sent that over to Bob and to Greg, so I don't know if they've had a chance to take a look at it. I don't know if they talked about it at all. I just said I miss being on Uptime because I know I sure would have been talking about this. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, we did talk about it. Greg wasn't on there. He was in traffic or had something else to do. So
Yeah.
I just see your email now. We could talk about this if you want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you want to actually I could probably share it as a screen, or you could share it as
Sure.
a screen if you'd like, and we could
Sure.
kind of read through it a little bit.
Yeah,
Let
for
me
sure.
uh let me find it. I'll find it in my email and I'll bring up the page,
Okay.
and that
I'll
way.
put you on for a sec too, and then I just gotta send an email out. But I'm
Sure.
here. I'm here.
All right, let's see. Share screen.
I gotta blow my nose too. That's code for blow my nose. I gotta send an email. I gotta,
There we go. Okay. So this came from a website. It's called Five Doves. Some of you may be familiar with it. And if you've never been to fivedoves.com, they believe in, it's a rapture website. Some of the people there are not pre-trib. This is a very, very open forum. There's not a lot of moderation here. And you'll get some really wackadoo theories, but you also get some really interesting, intriguing theories. So this one came from just somebody called WNF. That's who, which I don't know if they're if that's their actual initials, because they're kind of using this thing called forewarn as their keyword. The 7-letter word above serves as a mnemonic device for an aid in retaining the information I'm presenting in this document about a possible alignment on the calendar to that of the 70th week of Daniel, 7 years, 25, 20 days. I've been studying eschatology for about 50 years and hold to the pre-trib rapture perspective, as well as having studied the more specific calendar issues for more than half of that time. I've noticed this particular pattern of the 7-year set, which I'm presenting here, for quite a number of years. It occurs routinely about 8 out of 100 times. That is, in about 8 out of every 100-year sets, as I recall. But this particular 7-year set, 2025 to 2032, has additional unique characteristics which no other year set falling in this same pattern possesses. This document must necessarily be much more brief than I would like. Much more could be said, but this is the basic outline, the bare bones and amount of information that hopefully gets my point across adequately. Then he goes into, can we know? Matthew 24:36, but of that day and hour knoweth, perfect indicative, no man, is in the context of the subject surrounding his second coming to the earth. Revelation 19, Isaiah 27:9, 12 through 13, Matthew 24:29 through 31, not rapture, and is not conveying the idea that no one can or will ever be able to know. Even though Jesus himself also did not know during his earthly ministry before the cross, following his death and resurrection ascension, he again had perfect knowledge with the Father, and approximately 60 years later had John write the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him, unto Jesus, to shew his servants things which must come to pass in quickness, with speed, which is a noun, giving some more scripture references, referring to the future aspects of the book, what we now call the 70th week of Daniel, 25, 20 days. Note that the shew aspect, future aspect, begins from 4:1. A number of timing indicators are supplied therein. In that book, from chapters 4 through 19, my contention is that Jesus supplies the calendar dates outline of the 70th week. I will endeavor to support this contention in the remainder of this document, as well as providing additional intriguing information regarding this. So far, let's see. All right, so Shane ducked out. I was going to ask his opinion on this, but I was actually reading the document, so I just came back and saw that Shane's gone. So let's just continue looking at this document. Let's kind of talk about it a little bit along the ways. First of all, are we all okay with this? Are we okay with the fact that, as this person says, can we know? Can we know the day of the rapture? I don't really know. I'm going to give you my, this is my own take on this little section here. Can we know? This is just my take. Oh, you're back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I read through this first part up until where he says, can we know, this little section. And I was just saying to the audience, like, are we okay with this as far as, I know there's some debate about this. This writer is saying that this really refers to the second coming and isn't referring to the rapture. But I kind of feel like it probably still does refer to the rapture, as far as nobody really knowing that day or hour. And I've always contended that if anybody comes to you and says that, they know the day and they know the hour, they really ought to be coming to you with a sign from heaven as well. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you it's this day, and guess what? I'm going to call fire down from heaven so that you know that God is verifying this particular date. I think that would be at least a reasonable request. But now this individual is seeming to claim that he's getting all of his information based on dates and things that are already in the book of Revelation, as if it's sort of a sub layer that we just haven't been able to kind of put the pieces together. So I'm going to kind of take it as that. How do you feel about that, Shane? Are you okay with that?
Well, I missed most of this because I went upstairs to get some water.
Right,
So,
right.
so what are we talking about here? Talking
Okay.
about Matthew 24?
Yeah, so this individual's, that's the first thing he's asking is, can we know? And he's basically making his point that that obviously Jesus didn't know during his earthly ministry, but now he does know. And so he's trying to make the point, what I think he's trying to convey in this section 1, can we know? I think he's trying to convey that after Jesus went back to heaven, that when he gave the revelation to the Apostle John, that the information that we really need in there to know the the timing of the rapture is actually in the book of Revelation, if we understand the patterns and that kind of stuff like that. So,
Right.
I'm kind of on the fence with that. I mean, like I said, I think, I've always kind of been of the position that if somebody claims to know the day or the hour, they need to come with a sign from God to verify it. But if the information is legitimately in the Word of God and we just haven't discerned it yet, I guess I
Yeah.
could, that's kind of like if you remember the old the show Mythbusters, where it was myth confirmed, myth
Yeah.
busted, and then myth plausible. I guess I would call this like maybe plausible. That maybe
Yeah.
if somebody. So anyway, that's as far as I
Yeah.
got with it.
Well,
Um,
somebody's gonna guess the right day eventually
yeah,
because there's only 365. So you're
yeah,
gonna have a guess, right? Like the way I kind of look at it as we just had a baseball player, Gurriel. I
mm-hmm,
might be butchering his name, from the Dominican Republic with the Blue Jays. Okay. He was going to go into the free agency to see what he could do for his contract, like to see how much he can get paid.
mm-hmm,
To us, I didn't have a conversation with Vladdy about his contract.
mm-hmm.
My wife didn't have a conversation with him about his
Right.
contract, but the rumorville all over the internet was he's asking for between 350 million to 500 million, around that ballpark. So we didn't know that they were actually having conversations behind closed doors about when the contract was going to be signed. We didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that. We just, because they're not telling us,
Right.
but I kind of had a gut feeling that Vladdy was going to get signed because he's our marquee player. He's the best
Mm-hmm.
player with the Blue Jays, and it would be crazy for them not to sign him.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know when. We're thinking,
Right.
man, if it goes into the summer, boy, it's going to be tough to get this guy now because he's going to be just wide open season. All these teams are going to be looking for him, all the stuff. While we're thinking about it, they signed the deal behind closed doors and then announced it, that he
Mm.
signed 18-year or 15-year deal for 500 million. So that's kind of how I look at the rapture. I don't think that Jesus didn't know, because he's with the Father's with him. They know each other, but it wasn't for us to know.
Right.
I kind
Right.
of look at it from that, because then now you're dealing with Jesus didn't know everything.
Right.
I think he's
Right.
doing exactly what his Father told him to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what his Father didn't tell him to do was don't talk about the rapture.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So that he
Exactly.
just, it wasn't mentioned. So why would he need to talk about it so much, right? And Paul reveals the mystery to us.
Right.
And this was something that was kept secret. Like, we're also talking about the church, because Jesus didn't spend a lot of time talking about the church and how it functioned. He
Right.
was going after the lost sheep of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about a secret that was created before time began, before the devil was created, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to keep the church and I'm going to keep the rapture. I'm just going to keep it hidden. And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be unsearchable in the Old Testament, because there are a lot of things that you can't listen to Paul and then go, oh, yeah, he's spelling it out for us in the Old Testament. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
that. He's getting
Right.
a revelation from Jesus Christ,
Right.
and he's
Right.
sharing us what was on his heart. And now we get the church and how it functions, how we're supposed to operate. You can't look up joint heirs in Christ in the Old Testament. You don't see that anywhere. The
Right.
Jews are like, no, the Gentiles are down here. We're up here because we have the Torah. We have
Mm-hmm.
the temple. We have everything. They got to come to us. And they kind of missed some of the things, because Jesus was also talking about himself being a temple, and they got that confused.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't easy until Paul came along and started revealing mysteries. And he
Right.
said some of them were unsearchable in the Old Testament. You're not going to find it.
Right.
It's
Right.
directly from Christ. But now that we have the complete Bible,
Mm-hmm.
now we get all the mysteries. We just got to figure them out and go, well, what was Paul talking about? Because some of his letters, believe it or not, are very difficult to understand.
Right.
right? So that's kind of
Absolutely.
how I look at the rapture is like Kevin Hookman says, it's going to happen
It's
when it
gonna happen when it
happens.
happens, yeah. The one thing I did appreciate about this letter that was posted that we're reviewing here, I did appreciate that whoever this writer is, this individual was
Took
obviously
time.
trying to stay as close to the Bible as possible and as close
Yes.
to the information that we're given in the Bible. There was a
Yes.
little place where I felt like he kind of got off track a little bit, and I'll I guess when we get to it, I'll tell you what
Sure.
that was that kind of triggered me a little bit. But I did like how, like I said, he's trying to glean his information just from the Bible. And,
Yes.
he's talking about the biblical pattern of the 70th week, 25, 20 days, the beginning, the middle, the end. And, again, this is a really long document, but he's trying to he's saying that the end of it is corresponds with scripture elsewhere, saying when kings go forth to battle. I guess he's looking at that as when Jesus returns to go to battle, and he's drawing that parallel. The beginning, behold, a lamb standing as it had been slain, and he's trying to say that right now Jesus is seated at the right hand of God. So when he actually stands to open the seals, that's going to be the beginning of the tribulation, which I concur with. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
that we don't see any of the seals. I think that's one thing that we've all been consistent on, is that we
Yeah.
get raptured, and sometime right after that, he's contending, I think, immediately, but sometime certainly after we're raptured, Jesus stands up to open the seals. And then the middle, he's describing, he's saying it's Yom Kippur, which is interesting because I think we've always typically viewed this thing as going from fall feast to fall feast, with Passover being the midpoint of the tribulation. I think so. He's looking at it from a whole different angle, which I appreciated. I thought that was kind of interesting. And that's what basically, like I said, it's a very, very long letter.
Yeah. Looks like he
He
put a lot of work
he put a
into it.
lot of work into it, and this is when he's saying what's unique about this pattern. So what he's saying is unique is that basically, and see, here's what makes this unique. I'm going to try to sum it up a little bit because, like I said, I don't think we can read this whole thing and keep everybody's attention here in the live stream. But what makes this unique, this set of years unique, is that he's saying this thing has to go from first fruits until um, Nissan 1 of like 7 years later. He's saying basically first fruits is the first part of the that's the first day of the tribulation, first fruits. He's saying the midpoint is going to be on Passover, or no, I'm sorry, the midpoint's going to be Yom Kippur, and then the ending of it is on Nissan 1. He goes through some really interesting points in this thing, that this whole thing would start on the first day of the week on a Sunday. It would end on a Sabbath on the seventh day of the week. So, there seems to be some rhyme and reason to that. And what's unique about this year is the fact that because of the way that Leviticus talks about the Feast of First Fruits, you got to understand, this is what's kind of weird, and you have to understand a little bit of the way Hebrew, the Hebrew people celebrate these feasts. Passover is considered a separate Sabbath from the regular weekly Sabbath. So what would happen is, in order to figure out when first fruits is, which that was the day of Jesus's resurrection, what happened was you would have Passover, and then in between Passover and first fruits, you had to have a regular weekly Sabbath. Okay. Now, in the year that Jesus was crucified, that was easy because
Yeah.
he was crucified. Most people think like on a Wednesday, or maybe Thursday, and Friday just doesn't work. That doesn't work. But in any case, sometime during midweek, he was crucified. He was put in the tomb. The regular Saturday Sabbath came and passed. And then on Sunday, the first day of the week, is when he rose from the dead. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? We all get that. But like on a year like this year, and this is what makes this unique, and where he's kind of starting to kind of get off into this, get in the weeds here a little bit. In this year, it's interesting because Passover actually started on Saturday. So because Passover started on Saturday, it doesn't really count for that weekly Sabbath, because Passover sort of overshadows the weekly Sabbath, if you want to look at it that way. So what that means is that, like, this year, instead of, like, let's just say if Jesus was crucified on Passover this year, instead of 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb, he'd had to go 8 days and 8 nights, because they have to wait for another weekly Sabbath to pass. That's not going to come up until this Saturday, the Saturday before Resurrection Day. So see that it's a total different dynamic, and it doesn't happen every year like this. This is why he's saying
Right.
2025 is kind of unique. So
Yeah. Well, either Derek got raptured or he accidentally planted himself. I didn't do it. See my hands? They're up here. So maybe he'll be back. It was interesting. We'll wait for him. He could be one of those long-winded talkers that talks and then he doesn't know that he's off. He might not realize it. Oh, he did realize it. Okay. There he is.
Okay, I can't be too hard on Gary Gates the other day for any live stream.
What happened?
I really don't know. I was switching back and forth. I was going between the screen that I was sharing and
Oh, yes.
toggling back and forth. And my mouse pad, it's also one of those where if you touch it, it clicks.
Yeah.
So I have no idea. I must have been scrolling over and must have clicked leave studio by mistake or something because all of a sudden I'm like, hey, where did I go? So we can't be too hard on Gary. Stuff happens, you know.
That's so funny.
But
yeah, Gary came on last time and he just popped his head out. He's like, "Hey, I'm being blown all over the place by the wind," and then he hit exit on our live stream.
Yep.
Like,
And that was that.
okay, so you're going
exactly.
somewhere interesting. I have a question for you
Okay.
about the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday resurrection or the crucifixion. That's
Okay.
interesting to me. I've heard that before, but maybe you could dive into it a bit. Like I've always been taught that Good Friday was the day that Jesus died because they wanted to get him down off before the Passover started, that kind, or before the Sabbath, I think,
Before the
or
Sabbath,
is it before this? Yeah. So I'm open to learning about that. I don't have a either way kind of thing.
That's I mean the main thing with that is that, you know, and this is why a lot of people advocate for a 33 AD crucifixion, because that is in 33 AD, you know, that's the year that they could have made that work with Good Friday and everything, you know. But the problem with it, the biggest problem is that the math just doesn't work. You know, some people have tried to argue that, you know, he was, you know, Friday in the tomb, Saturday in the tomb, Sunday part of the day, and they came out, you know, like they're trying to do this crazy mental, you know, math gymnastics to make this thing work. But Jesus literally said that he was going to fulfill the sign of Jonah, which was, and he defines it as Jonah was in the heart of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. So he had to have 3 full days and 3 full nights. It couldn't have been partial this or partial that. So this is why I say just the math of it does not work for a Friday crucifixion.
So is there a chance that perhaps the idea is that when the Jews were thinking, we don't want to basically contaminate ourselves from having to deal with a dead body, basically, and I think this goes all the way back to Joshua, where no one was allowed to stay on a tree into the evening. Like they had to take them down before, let's just say before 6 p.m. So is it possible that on a Wednesday, the Jews are like, man, we're cutting it close because we got so many little things to do on Thursday to get ready for Friday. We got to have this thing shut down by Friday night at 6. Is that kind of what we're thinking of?
I mean, it's you know, first of all, you got to understand, and this is where it's crucial to understand. We don't always think of things from a, you know, a Hebrew mindset, the way that they actually practice things from like the book of Leviticus. But so it's crucial to understand that in that week there were 2 Sabbaths. So when you're reading that the Sabbath was approaching, it could, you know, they could be talking about the regular Saturday Sabbath, or they could be talking about the Passover Sabbath. So you just have to kind of identify which one is actually being referred to. But the other thing that you have to understand is that Jesus and his disciples were actually kind of keeping a little bit of a different calendar than the rest of them, because you hear when it's referred to preparation day, many people believe that they actually ate their Passover meal like a day earlier than the rest. And that's why he was actually crucified on Passover. But so in other words, he was crucified on the day when they were slaughtering their lambs, and then they would eat it the next day, you know, or over that course of that night. And so basically, you know, they crucified him, but then they wanted to get on with their holiday, you know. So it's actually referring to the Sabbath of the Passover is what was approaching for the Jews, not the
which would make sense because that's a week-long process. It starts on a day, I'm guessing a Sabbath, right? Like a Saturday, and then it goes for 7 days, right? With all their everything ending on the seventh
Well,
day, I
it's
guess, right?
really it's whenever it starts, because it will
Whatever.
start during,
Okay,
yeah,
according to the moon or whatever, right?
yep,
Like
yep.
that's what they pay attention to.
Whatever,
It's
yeah,
like
whatever day, yep, whatever day
okay,
it starts, it'll go for 7 days, and then usually there's a regular weekly Sabbath in between somewhere in there, sandwiched in
right,
between. Like I said, this year it's kinda strange because it doesn't always happen where Passover and the Saturday Sabbath fall on the same day, but this also kinda gives us the context for what the women were doing at the tomb at the first day of the week because see, they put him in the tomb. They couldn't
yes,
go and do anything to his body because not only was the Passover Sabbath, but like as soon as the Passover Sabbath was over, the regular weekly Sabbath, the Saturday Sabbath had come. So like
yeah,
the Passover Sabbath ended on a Friday, and then of course Friday night into Saturday night is the regular weekly Sabbath.
yeah,
So there was nothing they could do. They just had to sit and wait, you know. So they were
right,
showing up the first day of the week. This was their first chance to actually do anything to, for the body for
right,
burial, you know.
right.
So
So they're arriving on Sunday.
mhm.
Could we use that as a benchmark for being because their nights and days are opposite of what we
Yes.
think, right? Because their day starts at night, right? Is that fair
Yes.
to say? So
Yes.
at 6 o'clock
Sundown.
at night is the start of the Sabbath, which is the beginning of their day. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. I mean, see, some have even said now they came to the empty tomb on Sunday morning, but
Right,
some have even said, according to the way, according to the Jewish calendar, that Jesus would have actually risen on Saturday night after the sun went down.
right.
Now that's the first day of the week because now the
Yes.
Sabbath's over, the sun
Yeah,
goes
so
down.
that's the morning, but it's at
Yeah.
our night, their
Yes.
morning,
Yes. Yep.
6 o'clock at night, and then when the ladies got there, it's almost like evening.
Yeah, yeah, it's just early hours of the morning. They get there the first opportunity they can, and he was
Yeah.
already risen. He's
So if
already.
he's so if he's already risen going off of Saturday night,
Hmm.
then you can back up Friday, Thursday, Wednesday looks like where the action is going
Yeah,
on. Is that fair?
exactly,
Something like
exactly.
that?
That's
Okay.
fair. Yeah,
That kind of
definitely
makes
fair.
sense to me because I
Yeah,
I get the idea that we celebrate the 25th. So if we're gonna celebrate Jesus' birthday on the 25th and we
right,
don't think it's the 25th,
right.
I think there's a little bit of wiggle room with when it
Yes,
comes to history and going,
yes,
we celebrate Sunday because we're not trying to exchange it. We're not calling Sunday our Sabbath.
right.
That we're calling Sunday the start of our week. And why not start the week off with a bang by worshiping our Savior? Instead of
Yeah,
ending the week, we start the week on a Sunday and we're just gonna go to church. We're gonna do all that, and then the rest of the week we work, blah, blah, blah. Right. So we're not taking over the Sabbath. Some people say, oh, the
right,
Sabbath's actually the
right,
Sunday now. No, no, no. Totally different. We just celebrate on a Sunday. We could
right.
celebrate Monday, Tuesday,
Any day,
Wednesday,
any day,
Thursday, 7 days a week if we wanted to. There's
any
no
day. Yeah,
rule.
there's
We
no rule.
just
That's right.
we just
Any
find
day
it
and every
more
day.
convenient. Yeah, we find it convenient. So Christmas 25th, we celebrate. We know it's pagan, all this kind of stuff, but it seems to work out for us
Right.
because
Everybody.
we
Yep.
get 2 weeks of holidays at Christmas time, whatever,
Right.
right? That kind of
Right.
stuff. So
Right.
so I think I could be forced to wiggle my way out of a little bit of it had to be Sunday
Right.
morning.
Right.
So I'm okay with that because I know we don't understand all the dates. I tell
Right.
you, we don't know exactly when this happened or that happened and all
Right.
this stuff. That's the
Right.
confusion with all the calendars. So I'm okay with entertaining ideas of, okay, maybe it did happen on Wednesday. Could be. It's
Yeah.
kind of fascinating
Well, that
actually
like I
to
said,
start
that's how
thinking
I
about
feel
this.
about, like Good Friday. It's like I don't believe he was crucified on a Friday, but like you said, like everybody recognizes his birthday on December 25th, and we all pretty well know that's probably not it. So
Yeah.
I'm okay with Good Friday being observed. Everybody just remembers this as the day of his
Yes.
death, but
Yes.
like you said, it probably wasn't on a Friday.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is interesting is he did have to rise from the dead on a Sunday because and again, like I said, if it were this year, if the crucifixion happened this year,
Yeah.
it would still be this resurrection, Easter Sunday coming up
Yeah.
because of the way that Leviticus is structured. And Leviticus says that because this was a fulfillment of the first fruits offering. And
Yeah.
so the way it's structured is it has to be offered on the day after the Sabbath. So that's always going to be a Sunday.
Yeah.
Always. Same
Yeah.
thing with
Always.
Pentecost, by the way. The
Yeah.
Feast of Shavuot or Pentecost always going to be a Sunday. Has to be a Sunday because of the way
Yeah.
it's set up in Leviticus.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
There is something going on there. I just loosely looked at it before, like, and I think part of it is when we read the Bible,
Hmm.
we insert time markers ourselves. We'll go,
Hmm.
oh, chapter 1 has to be 5 minutes later than the previous book of the
Right.
Bible. It has to be
Right.
5 minutes later. And it's like, no, that's loony. That's ludicrous. There
Hmm.
are time gaps in there. So just because we see a handful of Jews saying we can't allow this guy to stay on the cross or whatever, we got to
Hmm.
crucify him a bit earlier or whatever it is, that may not happen in 1 minute conversation. It might have happened over an hour, back and forth debate.
Right.
Who knows what's going on there, right? They got to go
Right.
to Pilate and convince him after they after Joseph and Nicodemus put him in a tomb. They had to convince Pilate later, can you release the body from the cross, like when they're going to
Hmm.
put him in? And then the Jews said, we got to seal it up because somebody's going to come and take it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they have Roman soldiers there to guard it because they couldn't guard it because maybe it's on the Sabbath. Like there is a Sabbath. Like I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think he was crucified on Monday
Right. Right.
and then
Exactly.
Wednesday he
Exactly.
rose, right? So
Right. Exactly.
the
Exactly.
ballpark seems to lead Wednesday to Saturday, maybe
Seems to be.
Thursday to
Yeah.
Sunday, like the resurrection. Because
Yep.
if we're using hard, fast timelines of Jonah, I lean more on biology when it comes to the crucifixion than the time of Jonah being 72 hours.
Right.
Only because David said, your Holy One will not see corruption. Doctors will say a day, eh, not so much is going to happen to the body. 2 days, you're getting in that threshold where day 3, depending
Oh
on your
yeah.
diet
Oh
and
yeah.
whatever it is, you start decomposing, you start
Yes.
breaking down and all this stuff. So that's kind of the way I look at Jesus had to resurrect before his body started to decay. Like he died, but he rose again. So is that within 72 hours? Is it 70?
Either
Is
that
it
or he just
68?
supernaturally his body didn't see decay for 3 days. You know, I mean,
I agree.
because
I
you know,
agree because his body to me is different DNA
right?
than
Yes.
Adam from the dust.
Yes.
But it's interesting that David had a timeline in his head. Perhaps he knew that, hey, after 3 days, there's nothing left of the body. But
Yeah.
we still have Lazarus raising up 4 days later, which
Right.
his
Right.
body would have been pretty bad. So
Well,
I
that's what
think
the sister said, right? By now he stinketh, you know. So
yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. So I firmly believe that he came from heaven and was placed into the womb of Mary by the Holy Ghost, not because of Joseph. She
Right.
was a virgin. So I'm okay with his body not seeing decay. I'm 100% okay with that.
Here's another thought that I just had while, just as we're talking about this. So and I don't know if this is true or not. It's a thought that I had, but so like when we die, us typical people, we die. If you go to the funeral home and they prepare your body, what's the first thing they do? They drain all your blood out of your body and they
You
pump
don't
you
look
full
the
of
same. Yeah.
embalming fluid,
Yes.
formaldehyde or whatever to try to delay the decay and help you to,
Yes.
okay. So what happened with Jesus on the cross? When he was on the cross, I have heard people say that every ounce of his blood was drained out of him by the time they
That's
whipped him. By
interesting.
the time, so yeah, so when you think about it,
You
that
could have
may
been drained already.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That may be another reason why it slowed the decay of his body, simply because he had no blood left in him.
Oh, man.
Um,
That's a good
you know,
case right there. That's
yeah, I
interesting.
mean, who knows, but it's interesting to think about. I mean, it's just like I said that that page that I was reading from, where the guy kind of lost me a little bit was then later on in the page, and I'm not taking away from this. This is an interesting thing, but I don't know that what I'm saying is I don't know that it proves his case like I think he thinks it proves his case. Is when he examines the year 2025 and 2032 and all this other stuff, he starts getting into these numbers, and I'm not a huge numbers guy. I can't, like, my brain just doesn't process all these super calculations, but
Yeah.
he starts dividing this year by that year and comes up with, some number and a decimal point 6666666666666, and then
Right.
he divides this year in point 666666666, and he's like, this only happens for 2025 and 2032. Again,
Right.
kind of leading us down that path that, well, maybe when John said, those that have wisdom, his number
Yeah.
is 666.
Yeah.
To me, like I said, interesting, yes,
Yeah.
definitely interesting. I don't know that seals the deal for me, but
Yeah.
he certainly put a lot of work into that. And the other thing I thought was intriguing was basically because he does believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, whoever this individual was, he is proposing, if he's saying, like, if I'm right about this whole thing, and I think, I don't think he's setting a date. I think he's just saying this is kind of what his calculations have led him to think could be a possibility. But he's saying if he's right, then he would think that both the rapture and the tribulation would both happen this Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, which would be interesting. That would be
Yeah.
certainly interesting.
Yep.
And he doesn't seem to leave any room for any gap. And that's what's
Yeah.
interesting too. A lot of people talk about a gap, and I'm kind of on the fence about that, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people think that there's going to be a gap, and I just can't get away from thinking that, like we were talking about this on Rick's show last night, everything is set up right now. It's all the pieces are in place for the tribulation. You see the signs being set up for World War III. You see the signs being set up for an economic collapse, diseases, all kinds of stuff. It's all in
Yeah.
place. The one thing that you don't really see set up, but is out there, it's behind the scenes, is the Antichrist. Because
Right.
we're not going to be allowed to know who he is until the tribulation starts, and by then we'll be gone. So you don't really see that, but it just makes me think that with everything else that's going on, with all this other stuff being set up, it's almost like when your mom and dad got you a Christmas present and you kind of knew what it was, but you didn't get to open it till Christmas morning.
Yeah.
You were ready to play with that thing. It's like, oh man,
Yeah.
you got me an Atari. I am ready to play with that thing. Soon as you say go, and I can rip the paper open. So
Yeah.
what I think is, like, if that's the case, if all this stuff is set up for the tribulation, World War III, and economic collapse, all this stuff we can see, obviously it's set up. We know the Antichrist is being set up, but he
Yeah.
hasn't been revealed to us yet. So what I'm saying is, as soon as the restrainers removed, as soon as the rapture happens,
Yeah.
don't you think the devil's going to unwrap that one first and play with it first? There's not going to be a whole lot of gap, I don't think,
Yeah.
because of the fact, like, once he's finally got his chance to play with that,
Yeah.
let's go. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
again, I don't know. I'm just
It's
guessing.
interesting. Somebody has a good question along that line. I have a theory.
Okay, go for it.
Question: what lineage does the Antichrist come from? I'm guessing this is off the record because I could do that.
Mhm.
Makes it so easy then because you can guess whatever you want.
Yep.
I think he's from the tribe of Dan,
Mhm.
just because it's missing in the book of Revelation, the tribe of Dan, but
Mhm.
so is Ephraim, to be clear. He's also missing from Numbers when
Mhm.
they're trying to number all the tribes and everything at the beginning. I think it's in Numbers where it's either Numbers or Chronicles. They're not there. They're
Right.
gonzo.
Right.
Like there's no mention of it. And then later when David is counting and all this stuff and all the tribes are coming together to be under his leadership, there's not a lot of Danites left. There's not a lot.
That's
So
right.
it's interesting. And I did a whole series on the Danites on my channel trying to be like Dan Carlin. Um, I feel like a huge portion of them left, stage left, as in they left on the coast because Deborah had a problem with them. They're like, why did Dad leave, like come off his ship? Why did he stay in the ships? Meaning to me that they were busy going back and forth with ship commerce along Tyre and Sidon and all that up and down the coast. You could argue that they went all the way down into Egypt, obviously into the Mediterranean Sea, and they were just going back and forth. And then there wasn't a lot of them left to take over Lachish because they not argued with Joshua, but they didn't agree with the terms because seven of the tribes had to go out and they had to draw basically a map of the area that they wanted. and then
Mm-hmm.
they would present it to Joshua, and then they would take a vote. Well, based on the population that these guys have, Judah, they already have their allotment. They get a lot
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of people. The Danites, you don't really got a huge population, but we're going to give you this area, and they didn't like it. So
Mm-hmm.
they started moving around, traveling until they found another area that was like, hey, these guys are all peaceful, and the people that they have partnership with, they're too far away to protect them. Let's go. And
Mm-hmm.
then they named it after Dan and all this kind of stuff. So Dan is an enigma to me, and it wouldn't shock me because of the prophecy that Jacob gave over his sons.
Yes.
The Dan will be
Yes.
an adder in the pathway,
Yes.
causing the rider to fall. And I'm like, boy, that is very serpentine theology kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Mm-hmm.
way that it was presented. If somebody said to me it's 100% the Danites, it's got to be there, I'd be like, you got a case there. You got a case. I'm not 100%, but I'm more than half because that's all I got. And nobody seems to know what tribe they're from today. Like
Right.
they don't
Right.
carry around a tribe card. Hey, I'm from
That's right.
Levi,
That's right.
right? You know what I mean?
That's right.
So
Exactly.
over
Exactly.
2,000 years, it gets a little bit difficult. But if I were to take a guess, I would say heavily Danite, then Ephraim, somewhere there.
I would totally concur with you based upon everything you just said. Those are all the scriptures that I would draw on as well. I think that prophecy that Jacob gave in Genesis 49 is really has a lot of, I mean, look, like you said, Dan was always kind of the first to run into paganism and idolatry, and it's kind of like we talk about some of these guys today, that are auditioning for the part of Antichrist. They're eager to put it on their resume. Let's just put it
Yes.
that way. We don't know who
Yeah.
they're going to be,
Yeah.
who the Antichrist is, but there's a lot of job applicants that have some pretty good looking resumes, and that would be on Dan's resume that he just runs to paganism, runs to
Yep.
idolatry, seems like he's ready to be used by Satan.
Yep.
And when you get into that prophecy of Jacob in Genesis 49, I think it's interesting, the whole thing, the way that it reads, the way that it spells out. It says in verse 16, Dan shall judge his people, which is interesting. There's a play on words because Dan means judge. That's what Dan means in the Hebrew. It means judge. Actually, the prophet Daniel, God is my judge. Daniel means God
Yeah.
is my judge. So Dan means judge. So Dan shall judge his people. There's a play on words, as one of the tribes of Israel. Now, hold on, wait a minute. Isn't he a tribe of Israel? I thought Dan was a tribe of Israel. So, in
Yeah.
other words, there seems to be something. Jacob seems to be saying that something's going to be out of place here. There's going to come a time when Dan is no longer included among the tribes, like you're saying, like we see in
Yeah.
Revelation, but yet he's going to want to insert himself and be a judge to Israel, even though he doesn't belong there
Yeah.
anymore. So that to
Here's
me kind of
here's
speaks of the Antichrist,
here's another word I'm going to throw across your bow here, and
Mm-hmm.
you'd probably appreciate this, understanding a little bit of Hebrew. Another word for judge is
Mm-hmm.
savior.
Yes. Yep.
Isn't that interesting that he will
Yes.
be a savior?
Yes.
And
Well,
if you think about serpent and all this kind of stuff, isn't that what the Antichrist is going to show up as? A savior,
yeah. And I mean
a
that
Messiah-like figure?
that's encoded right here too. See, that's what's so interesting about this whole prophecy. That just what you said is encoded right here in this prophecy, because it says 17, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backwards. So okay, let's look at this for a minute. We know the King of Kings, Lord of Lords is returning on a white horse. It's in other words, like Dan is trying to stop that. Dan is trying to
Yeah,
prevent the return of the king by
yeah,
biting the horse's heels. And so listen to how this prophecy closes. After it says, so that its rider shall fall backwards, which we know Jesus isn't going to fall backwards, but
yeah,
um, how Jacob closes this, he just says, I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. And that word for salvation, of course, is Yeshua. I've waited for your
yeah,
Yeshua, O Lord. And so it's almost like Jacob is seeing the future and he's seeing
yeah,
this Antichrist figure, and it
yeah.
makes him just cry out, come, come, Lord, come.
Yes,
When are you
yeah,
going to come? So
yes,
I would totally concur with you. I couldn't be 100%. I couldn't say like, oh yeah, it's
yeah,
got to be Dan, but there's
yeah,
certainly a lot of biblical evidences that would lead
yeah.
me down that
And
path.
they might, whoever the Antichrist is, he may not say he's from the tribe of Dan. He might
Right.
not even say
Exactly.
that. So,
Exactly.
but what I find interesting about those verses is the adder,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting as well because that is a poisonous, one of the most venomous snakes
Mm-hmm.
around as well. And there's a whole study on that. Um, but it goes after the horse.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't go after the person, which is
Right.
interesting because is that a symbolism that the only way that this guy could be powerful is to bluff or to
Mm-hmm.
scare? Because horses get really scared of
They
snakes.
do.
They
They
get a
do.
little jumpy, and so all you have to do is just rattle, and then that horse could be on high alert. And is that what is a trait of the Antichrist? I'm gonna bomb you unless you cooperate. I'm gonna nuke you unless you
Yeah.
cooperate. And then all of a sudden, whoa, I don't wanna
Yeah.
go toe to toe with
Yeah.
this, but maybe he doesn't have that power, but to the world, it's like he definitely has that power.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
And
there's a
you're
few
right too
people
about
that
that.
might they kinda feel like they're like that today. I won't say
Yeah.
Trump because I
No.
don't think it's Trump, but I'll say lump so
Lump.
nobody will get confused.
Yeah, you
I'll
missed
say
we gotta
lump.
have our code you missed our code word last night on Rick's show. Ingrid was on there and she was talking about a certain project where they project certain images that, we know is kind of like one of those keywords you can't really say. So I'm like, well, instead of, why don't you call it Project Green Bean? Everybody will know what you're saying if you say green bean, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right, and it is interesting because horses do spook very easily at snakes. I mean, that's just a I can
We all
remember.
do. I spook it. I don't like snakes, man.
I don't like them, but
If I look in my house and I see a cord, snake, oh no, it's just electrical cord in North America in the wintertime. Could be a snake. But that's how
I have
we're wired.
I have a ton of them out here where I live, and I always taught my kids, especially my son, because my son would spend the most time with me out there in the outdoors in the woods, and I always just tell him to be aware of his surroundings and to
Yes,
just see the snake before the snake sees you, because
yes,
most of the time they won't hurt you unless you walk up on them and scare them, and then if
right.
you see him before he sees you, you'll be okay, But
Yeah. Isn't
I
that interesting though? That we
yeah
have to teach
yeah
our kids. And I actually heard a study or I watched a message with Jordan Peterson a while ago. Actually he spoke in Alberta. So my mom, my wife, and myself, we went to go see him live to speak. He spoke for 4 hours. You thought you were long-winded? He spoke for 4 hours straight, and the house was packed. Anyways, in one of his messages, not at this time, but he talks about the idea that and this is according to Jordan Peterson and all the literature that he's written. So I'm going to summarize it because if you listen to his channel, you have to watch 6 hours. So I'm
right.
gonna bring it down to like a minute. He said that there is biological evidence with people that somewhere going back thousands of years, and again, I'm not saying I believe age and all that stuff, what he says, but I'm just pretending I'm Jordan Peterson. If you go back, there's evidence, biological evidence that people at one point in history there was a race of people that were deathly afraid of snakes for some reason. So their eyes are designed to see color in order to detect one creature on the planet, and that is serpents, snakes.
That's
Our eyes
interesting.
are designed to do that. And we know this because women are afraid of snakes, which is interesting. It may not go right across the board. Like, obviously, there are women that have pets and all this kind of stuff. But I'm just saying that there's a reflex in us that if we know that if someone said, "Hey, I lost my snake," we
Yeah,
are on high alert all of a
yeah,
sudden. We are on
yeah.
high alert, but we're wired that way. Even when I'm driving, I'll see on the long side of the road, I'm like, I think I saw a snake. I think I saw a snake on the highway. It's weird that we're wired. And the scientist actually did a study with chimpanzees and would put lizard, put different kind of creatures up, you know, lions, hyenas, lizard, whatever, and then snake. and the thing would kind of all of a sudden be on high alert. And all it was doing was showing pictures to the chimpanzee, but they have something built into them to be afraid of snakes, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So there's something that goes like they're not wrong
Yeah.
that probably Adam coming out of the Garden of Eden was on high alert from then on for serpents.
For snakes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's,
Crazy.
like I said, there's something about them. I mean, they kind of give me the creeps. I've killed many of them. I killed a big rattlesnake out here where I live one time,
Oh wow.
and yeah, they those I don't like to get too close to. Those I'll usually get them with a shotgun or something if I have to, because you don't
Do
want.
you get the shivers picking up snakes?
Well, I mean, not if they're dead.
Like like I used to run a hotel and they would curl up on the door in the
Yeah.
sun. And
Yep.
I would come across and they're just garter snakes. So I'm like, whatever, what's the big deal, right? But you pick them up, they try and gum you. They'll
Oh
try
yeah.
and gum
Yeah.
you. And then I'm like, oh man.
They're creepy little creatures.
And I get the
Creepy.
shivers all of a sudden, right? And I remember one time going into the grass and I'm looking at a snake and I'm like, you're an idiot. Because I could see you, but it stood up in a grass blade like this. And there's grass blades
Hmm.
beside it. So I went in the house, got my camera, went out, put it on the grass, and then I went right up to it. And all of a sudden it went down. And of course, where would it go?
Hmm.
Towards the camera. And it went right underneath me. And I'm like
Ugh.
freaking out.
Ugh.
It just instantly, I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
and
they
it was
creep
only
you out.
about this big. It was
They creep
tiny,
you out.
right?
I had one in
But
my
they,
house one time. I had to get out of my house. I don't know how it got in my house, but the dog was like, on high alert. The dog's like, looking around, and my
yeah.
wife. All of a sudden, I heard my wife like scream, like, "Ah!"
Oh, yes.
She's like, "Derek, Derek!" I'm like, "What? There's a snake in the house." I had to get the snake out of the house.
They,
Just, ugh.
they play
But
possum, though. I don't know if you do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
They basically, like, I remember I saw a snake go into a water, so I was throwing rocks at it because
Hmm.
I have no problem killing snakes.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't
Well, I
mind
will
it,
say this
whatever.
though. I will say this, and this is good advice to anybody, especially if
Yeah.
you live on a farm, because I had to learn this lesson myself. I didn't, when I first moved out here and got settled, I killed every snake I came across. I don't care. But someone once told me, and it's been really
Yeah,
good advice. If
sure.
you have non-venomous snakes, like we have the black
They're
king
good
snakes
for,
around here.
yeah,
Well, what they
insects.
do is they actually eat the young venomous snakes. If you let them live, they'll hunt
Oh,
down and eat the venomous. And ever
that's a
since
good
then,
thing.
like the only
Yeah,
time I will kill a non-venomous, if it gets in my chicken coop and starts robbing
yeah,
eggs,
yeah,
then
yeah,
sorry, you got to
for
go.
sure. Yeah,
But
yeah, and I'm not saying I go out
other,
and hunt them, but I did see a snake swim in the water, and he was trying to get away from me. So I threw a bunch of rocks at it, and then I grabbed it with a stick and brought it out and put it onto the shore. And I put it upside down on the shore, and it would slowly go like this, turn over to its stomach. And I'm like,
yeah,
"You're not even dead." It was playing dead in the water, and I'm like, "Oh, it's dead. I'll leave it alone." Grabbed the stick and pulled it to shore. And then when I walked away, I wanted to see what it would do. All of a sudden, after about a minute or so, it slithered away. So it pretended that it was dead.
yeah. Well,
Weird.
that's sometimes that's their defense mechanism. Like, hey, if I play dead, will you leave me alone?
Yep.
But
Smart.
But yeah,
Smart.
snakes are creepy thing, and like you said, horses. But I can remember one time about it was over 30 years ago, because I got married 31 years ago this month, and this was 2 or 3 years before I got married. I was a trail guide. I used to give horseback rides, and I was a trail guide up in the mountains, and I was giving this one trail ride for, I don't know, probably about 20 people, I guess, were behind me, and all of a sudden I came around this place, and my horse all of a sudden just kind of
Yep.
like
Oh
started
man.
bunching up under me like he didn't. And so I started looking. I'm looking around like, what is freaking this horse out? And I found a whole den of copperheads. There were probably about
Oh
6 or 8
wow.
copperheads, and I killed all of them. And then like I just tied my horse up, killed all of them, and then took the trail ride through there. And man, you thought a lot of us worked on tips. You'd think these people, they tipped me so good. They thought like I just saved their
Yeah.
life. Like, oh man,
Yeah.
you'd think I just killed a gorilla or something. I mean, it
Are
was just like,
they copperheads? Are they the cobras? Or are they the different colored orange and black? Or what are they? What's
yeah,
copperhead?
they're like they're brown and orange and very venomous, highly
Oh
venomous.
yeah. Yeah,
They're as
for
bad
sure.
as a rattlesnake, but they're quiet. At least a rattlesnake, you have a rattle and you can hear them. These copperheads, you can't hear them. They'll just, if
Yeah.
you don't get to them first, and they catch you, they'll put a hurting on you.
Yeah, crazy,
So,
eh?
so
Cool, man. Well, we've been going an hour. I told the audience, I said I'm only probably going to go about 10 minutes because I'm not
yeah,
feeling the greatest.
yeah, I can tell. I'm sorry, bro.
it's allergies though. Like
Yeah,
it's more, it's annoying more than anything because I start to sound like nasally,
yeah. Can you
Start
get
to
local honey where you are? Do you have any local honey?
We don't have bees here in
Really?
Alberta. No
Too
bees.
cold for
It's
bees up there?
illegal. It's illegal to have bees.
Really?
No, no, no. It's too cold right now for
Too
bees.
cold, yeah.
But we did, I think 2 years ago, our bee population went down about 50% in Alberta. It's
Do you
kind of
have
weird.
anybody though when it's your when the weather's nice up there, does anybody make local honey?
Oh yes, yes,
Okay,
yeah. There's little markets and all this kind of stuff here.
try to get a hold of some local honey, even if from last year, and make yourself, just make a tea with honey and lemon, because the reason why is because local, and this is why for anybody out there, local honey,
Yeah,
you could go to the supermarket and just buy a thing of honey, and any kind of honey is good, but local
right.
honey, the reason local honey is good is because the bees collect the pollen that
Yeah.
cause your allergens. So like if you get
Oh,
local honey and you consume local honey, it almost helps you to build up an immunity
ooh,
to some of those local allergens because the bees are already doing the hard work for you. So,
yeah. I'm gonna do that. I think I have a dairy lactose. I think I'm lactose
hmm
intolerant with dairy, so I have a lot of coffee.
hmm
And with the weather like it is, like it's nice, but it's
yeah,
spring, and that hits me because I have little tiny bit of asthma as well. And when
yeah,
you talk a lot, it's
yep.
annoying because you need your
Oh
nasal
yeah,
when
yeah,
you're talking on a channel,
yes,
right?
yes. I feel you, brother. I feel you. Well, we're going through our season known as winter summer here. We don't have a spring anymore. It goes
Did
from
you put the
winter.
ca- did you put the canoes away? That's the
Yeah, but
question.
the canoes, yeah, the canoes are away, but it's like the other day it was 80 and then it dropped down and now it's in the 40s. It's topsy
Yeah,
turvy. It gets really crazy, but it's springtime here. It's just a little nutty weather, and
yeah,
everybody with allergies around here is kind of in the same boat as you, going a
yeah,
little bit nuts, and so I feel
yeah.
for you, bro. I feel
Yeah,
for you.
like I feel good at everything. It's just
Yep.
it's annoying sounding like
Yes, it
Donald Duck
is.
all day long, right? So,
Yeah, exactly.
but
Exactly.
I appreciate you for being on the show today. So
All
thanks a
right, bro.
lot.
Well, it's good
Um,
seeing you. And if you do decide, are you doing a pre-record for Rev 5 for Sunday? Just
I
let me know.
yeah, I think so. I'm not sure what
All
day.
right. Well, just keep me in the loop.
Probably yeah,
Keep me in the loop.
probably Thursday. I'm thinking maybe
Okay. Well,
do a
just keep
little
me in the loop.
pre. Okay, I will for sure.
Sounds good, bro. All right.
Awesome.
God
Have a
bless
good
you.
night. All
You
right.
too.
See you
All
later.
right.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Let me just put a little ending to this. Let me tie it up with a nice little bow. I'll just remove you for a
There
sec.
you go.
Awesome. All right. That was Derek. So thanks everyone for being on the show. Like I always do, you can also pick up my book. It's now available on Amazon. You can purchase it. You get the paperback, the hardcover, the Kindle book. That is all available on Amazon. You can order it. You could, if you're watching this on TV, you could use your little QR code here. Use your little camera phone, and you can take a picture. Not take a picture. What am I saying? You just scan it, and buy the book, and off you go. So thank you guys. How can you tell I'm tired? All right. Thank you for watching the show. Really appreciate you guys. And I will see you in another video. Bye for now.
Black Swan Revelations here on YouTube brought you today's mind-bending journey. Dive into the discussion, your comments, questions, prayer requests, and powerful testimonies of Jesus' love are what fuel this community. Did today's episode hit home? Smash that like button. New here? Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a live stream or a video upload. Thanks for being part of today's adventure. Catch you in the next video, or maybe even in the clouds. Stay curious, stay blessed.